For having me.
Jordan, how are you today? Happy good afternoon. It's about 3 o'clock our time in LA and Sacramento. It's a pleasure to talk to you. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
It is a pleasure. We were talking about before we started recording. This is just an incredible book, and shout out to S.A. Cosby and who I follow on Twitter, and was just like this Jordan Harper book, and I'm like, okay, huge expectations, and definitely exceeded them. And obviously, I'm not the only one. You've gotten all kinds of accolades and praise, and we'll talk about that in a bit. I'd love to know kind of where it all started. I mean, I know you come from the Midwest. Is it Missouri? Is that right?
Yeah, Springfield, Missouri, which is the big city of the Ozarks.
Is that the capital of Missouri?
No, Jefferson City
Dang
is the
it!
capital of Missouri. No,
Dang it!
why would you? Trust me, if that wasn't true about Jefferson City, you would never think about Jefferson City in your life. You know, no disrespect. There's
No,
nothing
sure.
wrong with that, but it's just there's no reason for you to know Jefferson
I don't
City.
know. I don't know if you know about Jefferson City Twitter. They're gonna go after you now.
Oh no.
Oh no. But no, just I'd love to hear about just growing up and what you were into as far as, reading. Were you into like comics, and kind of like your relationship with the written word?
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, I was one of those kids who started very early wanting to tell stories and dictating stories for my mom to write into books.
Nice.
And I was before I was literate.
Mm,
Um, and just kind of growing up, I've always my entire life been a compulsive rereader of books.
okay.
And I can remember very strongly with it starting at least on my own with Harriet the Spy,
Hmm.
the Great Brain books.
Okay.
Um, which is a series of novels that take place in like turn of the century Utah,
Huh.
with a boy who the narrator is a boy whose older brother is like a con artist and genius
Whoa.
who likes doing scams around this like Utah city at turn of the century. They're great books.
Like a psychopath or like a lovable?
No, like, well, not quite lovable, but like
Okay.
not a psychopath, but
Okay.
like definitely like a selfish, greedy person
Uh-huh.
who the younger brother has to try and kind of deal with, although capable of magnanimity and
Okay.
things like that. But that and Harriet the Spy, Tom Sawyer, a lot of books about children misbehaving and forming their own path, which is really probably my introduction to crime fiction in a very
Yeah.
real way. I mean, Harriet the Spy is very much a very dark and weird tale for a
Hmm.
children's book, and
Right.
as is the Great Brain books and Tom Sawyer, and so started with that, and then yes, comic books and Stephen King at a way too young an age. Reading It when I was the same age as the
Woo.
kids in the book It, and like um, going from that on to like Frank Herbert and Dune, and
Mm.
becoming obsessed with Hunter S. Thompson as like a drug-addled teenager. In fact, that's what my first, when I knew I wanted to be a writer, and I had written fiction as a child, but like through my teenage and through up till my college years, I thought I wanted to be Hunter S. Thompson.
Hmm.
And in fact, went to the University of Missouri to become a journalism student there, along with being the largest college in my home state. University of Missouri also has a like the world's first journalism school, or at least this
Okay.
country's first journalism
Oh wow.
school, and one of the most respected. They run a daily newspaper, they run a TV station. It's like a
Mm.
real place. But I took a creative writing class before I ever took a journalism class in college, and no, that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And stuck with, well, I went back and forth. I was kind of going quickly here, but in my 20s I was a music journalist for a few years in St. Louis, Missouri. I was the music editor of the Riverfront Times, which is like the
Oh yeah.
alt weekly.
Definitely.
um, and I did that for a while. I wasn't particularly good at it. I'm much more suited for making things up. A lot of corrections issued on my behalf, I'm
Oh,
afraid to say. And it's just, also being a music critic is either a lifetime passion where
yeah.
you love me. I like music a lot. I love music, but like it's either a lifetime passion or you get out of it in your 20s,
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
and I was definitely the get out of it in your 20s guy.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I saw some on Twitter recently. Obviously, it's been rehashed, but it was about like Winston Churchill and his like daily diet, and that's mostly of cocktails.
Mm-hmm.
And that reminded me of Hunter S. Thompson. I was reading a couple years ago about his. Have you ever seen his daily intake?
Oh yeah, it's prodigious would be the word.
Prodigious would be the word.
Um,
Man.
well, that's the other thing that eventually came around for me, that like being a music critic and having in my literal contract that I had to go to bars and nightclubs 4 nights a week. I really enjoyed that for a while in my 20s, and now I am, gosh, almost probably 15 years sober at this point, which are probably fairly connected events,
Right.
And so I was never going to be Hunter S. Thompson, which is totally fine.
That's a
And
great thing.
yeah, and God, there's no place for Hunter S. Thompson anymore in this world.
Right. That's for sure.
I'm not sure how much room there is for novelists in the same way, but like, not to be dark, but so I did that for a while, and then I got to a place where my interest in crime, and because you're talking about like what my interests are, along with the movies, I came up at the right age to be obsessed with like Quentin Tarantino, Martin Scorsese, Michael Mann, like that golden era of crime films, was a big part of my life. My favorite TV show of all time is The Shield, which was at the very birth of like the golden age of television.
Right.
And all these things started to coming together. I started writing short stories that were crime based and getting them published in Thuglit, Todd Robinson, great magazine that was both at different times a print magazine and an online magazine. And wrote a very bad first novel that 3 people in the world have ever read, and that's the way it's going to stay. And then worked on these short stories, and then I wound up moving to Los Angeles, and getting into what's called the Warner Brothers Writers Workshop, actually based on a spec script of The Shield that I wrote, based on one of my short stories. And the Warner Brothers program, which they've just announced is shutting down, was a great training ground. It was a great way to break into Hollywood if you didn't have any contacts. You didn't have anybody. Nobody was your uncle or anything like that. And yeah, exactly. So I got into the Warner Brothers program, and they put me in an interview with Bruno Heller, creator of Rome and Gotham, and to the point of this story, The Mentalist, which had just finished its first season when I met Bruno, and he hired me to be on the staff of The Mentalist, and I was there from season 2 through the end. I co-wrote the finale with Bruno and Tom St. George, a great writer. I wrote 14 or 15 episodes of The Mentalist, which I really consider is like going to grad school. I got paid to go to grad school.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was great. And during that time, I started, working on my short stories, but also wanting to try another novel, and which eventually became She Rides Shotgun.
Okay. You're talking about writing for TV. Like, did you, sorry to use the organized crime lexicon here, but did you have to feel like you had to make your bones? I mean, how does that come about? You hear about like the writer's table, the writer's room. Like, is that 4 people? Is that 4 people and then they take it to 10 people? Like, how did that work about, getting yourself a place in there where it ended up being that you co-wrote the final episode?
Well, that's it. Writers' rooms vary, and they're shrinking as episode orders shrink. So like when we did The Mentalist, we did 24 episodes of The Mentalist most years. And the kind of shows that I tend to work on now, you do 8.
Right.
So you have different size writers' rooms, and you work for less weeks of the year, which is making television a little harder to do really well in. But so The Mentalist floated around 10 or 11 people in the writers' room. And most of us were there for the entire run or very close to it. And you learn, and this is something I tell young writers, is you don't actually, your job is like a first year writer. It's called a staff writer in television. Your job is not to become the biggest, baddest son of a bitch in the room. Your job is to kind of sit there, absorb everything, and say one thing a day, maybe 2, but only if it's good. Like, nobody is, that's the thing, is that you show up, you're dependable, you're fun to be in a room with, because that's the job, is sitting around a table with people. So you better have a pleasant personality. And and then you just keep going, and you write your first script and you take notes, and then you show that you can execute the notes, because it's not your baby. You know, being a lower level TV writer is doing something for somebody else. It's their vision. You know, The Mentalist was Bruno Heller's baby, not mine. And so you take his notes and you try and you show that you can be useful to that showrunner with the minimum amount of stress in their life. You know, that's really your job. And that's why you don't want to talk too much, because if you're just talking to show off, that's just causing static and getting in the showrunner's way. You want to have, I mean, not that this is, I don't know how many first year TV writers are listening, but it's your job is to say the best thing you can say all day and don't feel like you have to say anything else. And then, you know, you move up the ranks. And like I said, I was on The Mentalist for 7 years, and most of my because I did just move to LA when I got in, most of my really good friends that I've had for my time in television are people I worked with on The Mentalist, because we worked together for 6 years. And then I went from The Mentalist to Gotham, which was another show that Bruno Heller created. And so there were other people, some of us from The Mentalist and other people came in. But like, so Rebecca Cutter, who I have worked with, she was on The Mentalist, she was on Gotham, and then she created Hightown, which I did 2 seasons of Hightown, and she was the showrunner. You know, I've worked with her for 9 out of my 14 years in Hollywood, you know. And so you know, you learn and you get to know everybody, and you become more useful, you get more skilled. I used to do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which it's not just a random statement here, but you know, and that's a very belt oriented martial art, and it's not a time period so much as just you get a level of experience and you kind of climb up the belts.
Right.
And the TV writing is very similar. You can be a really, really talented writer, but my opinion is, you know, to actually execute television, you kind of have to go and you have to show up for 7 or 8 years before I would think, okay, that's a black belt of television. You know? Okay. And I do think, I mean, when I say 7 or 8 years, that's what I think is like, before I would think that's a black belt. That is a person you can trust in any situation to, you know, do what they do.
I appreciate that. I mean, the little I know of like screenplays and writing for TV and writing for the screen, or screens, plural, fairly formulaic. Is that safe to say, or not necessarily?
I mean, it depends. You know, there is a template. And you know, repetitive or formulaic doesn't always have to be a bad thing. I think that a lot of people watch a lot of television wanting that same thing. But I do think, for me, like, one of the reasons I'm so glad, even though I'll be honest, like, The Mentalist isn't the kind of show that I watch in my free time, and it wasn't when I started the show, and it's not today. But like, having to spend that kind of time getting basically most of my black belts on a show that is as rigidly structured as a Case of the Week mystery show is incredible training for plot and story. And story mechanics, in the same way that I believe like a poet is better served by learning how to do highly structured, you know, rhyming stanzas and you know, and very formal poems, and then go nuts, go be free poet, but learn how to
learn the rules before you can break them, type of thing.
Exactly. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value to that, which is why I like people, when I'm hiring, now that I'm at a level where I hire writers as a head writer, I like people who have both, who have creative drive and a creative voice of their own, but also have been in the trenches.
Does it change the way you watch TV? Is it you know, like a coach watching a basketball game? You know, you can't. I mean, can you watch TV for pleasure?
I don't watch a lot of dramatic television anymore. I'll be honest. I can watch films. And I don't have that feeling. And maybe I would if I wrote more screenplays for features. But no, I don't enjoy most dramatic. I also think, not to be a hater, but I think we're in a very bad period of television right now. I think, you know, the golden age of television ended. Nobody noticed when it ended, but it did, and we're in a very different era right now. So when I do watch dramatic television, and again, I'm also, by the way, I'm old, and maybe this is just an old person's opinion at this point, that I tend to go back to that era of rewatching The Shield, rewatching Deadwood, rewatching Twin Peaks, you know, that to me, those are the things I find pleasurable, because I think modern television has become bifurcated, and you either have case of the week network TV shows that are, I'm sorry, but most of them are really dumb at this point. Like, and then you have shows that are maybe smarter, or maybe more, ethically interesting, but don't have any structure, don't have any drive, are missing some basic pleasures of the form. And my favorite things tend to be something that unifies those two drives, which I don't think of as just being middlebrow, because I find most of the highfalutin television right now to be pretty middlebrow. I'm being really negative right now, but I'm just like, no, I think that those in most art forms, my favorite things are people who are both trying to entertain and adhere to some kind of genre and execute at a level that is equal to the most kind of out there people. So everybody from David Lynch to Michael Mann in movies, Elroy, obviously, Cormac McCarthy, David Peace, Megan Abbott in books, and again, like Deadwood in television, are those are things that have. There's a thing I say in writers' rooms all the time, which is "Por qué no las dos?" or "Why not both?"
You throw that in the book, I like that.
Yeah, it's just something that I there's always these like categories that are placed on things that try and suggest that something has to be one way or the other, and they tend to be marketing ideas. They're just categories. They're just record shop bins that they make you put things into,
right?
And then people started adhering to the laws of the bins, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So that my next question was going to be how you thought about the title or the label of like crime writer or writer of noir, and you just can say I'm a writer.
Well, look, I mean, I'm very proud of the genre that I'm in. I love crime fiction. I love what I do, but I do want to be judged, and I want to be judged against everybody.
Sure.
I it's not that I want to transcend the genre, which some people say. I'm very proud of the genre. I just think the genre, if the genre work is good, it's as good as anything.
Yeah.
And I want to be judged against everybody else, because that's the level I'm trying to punch at. I am trying to exist where I think I can, that a really great crime book, again, by like Megan Abbott, is as good as anybody else is writing books right now. And are artistically interesting, ethically interesting, morally, philosophically, whatever. And again, I think I feel like that's just how I just want to be judged against everybody else.
Yeah.
And if somebody doesn't like me, that's fine. But I just want the genre as an art form. The art form is interesting. The constrictures of the marketing is what I find difficult.
Yeah. Todd Goldberg gave a similar answer. Are you familiar with his work?
Yeah, I know Todd. Yeah.
I mean, he's he in reading Everybody Knows and reading his latest, it's like they've got it figured out. Like, just you can just tell that you're just in the. I mean, maybe your prime is even, maybe you haven't hit your prime yet, but if this is your prime, it's a pretty dang great place to be.
Thank you.
He was in the same reading, his last short story collection, but he was talking about, when I asked that same kind of question, he was saying, hey, Steph Chaw's, Your House Will Pay, that you call that whatever you want, call it mystery. Like, that is a freaking great book. And I went and read it and said, yep. I mean, that's one of the best books, I've ever read.
Yeah, no, Steph's a good friend of mine, and she was actually the first person to give me notes on Everybody Knows.
Okay.
And no, she is amazing. That book is amazing, and that's exactly right. That why should that be placed in some category other than just great book? And the answer is marketing.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I was trying to reach for it with my foot. I can't reach. I actually have Todd's new book, Gangsters Don't Die.
Oh,
I have an arc of it right over there. Yeah.
All right. I know, you throw out the name, it's a big name, James Elroy. In the LA Times article about your latest, it talks about you're a big admirer of his work. And you said something to the effect of, quote, I really think that what he does better than almost anybody is create this dream world that is bigger and louder than the real world, and is therefore more accurate in some ways, particularly when you're talking about things like America or Los Angeles. Everybody Knows is about LA. There's the expression, some of the effect of like, if you want to know about one man, read nonfiction. If you want to know about all men, all people, read fiction. I wonder with Everybody Knows what you were able to do in fiction that maybe you couldn't do with nonfiction, about LA, about like the human condition,
Sure. Well, I think, particularly in these, I mean, I don't know if we should say, like, everybody knows there's a book about a black bag PR person whose job is not to get the good news out, is to keep the bad news in.
Hmm.
And nonfiction reporting about that, the truth comes out about 30, 40 years after the fact.
Wow. Yeah.
When they feel like they can publish what actually happened. It's not going to be today. It's not going to be tomorrow. So if
Like
I want to talk
redacted
about
White House papers or something like that, right?
exactly like that, exactly how
You know?
every so often some story about the CIA will come out about what they did 30 years ago, and people
Yeah.
go, "Oh my God, I can't believe how bad the CIA was 30 years ago." Go back 30 years. That same thing, they're saying the same thing 30 years ago. 30 years from now, a
Right.
story about the CIA will come out about right
Mhm.
now, and we'll
Mhm.
go, "Oh my God, I can't believe." And so, like, if I wanted to talk about Hollywood right now, and there's a lot of true stories that are fictionalized and everybody knows,
Dang.
um, I couldn't have published it if it was fact. But by
Sure.
fictionalizing it, you're able to talk about these things and with a freedom that fiction or nonfiction gets constrained by facts and not the truth. Like,
Mm.
nonfiction is about facts. It's about what you can prove actionably in this moment, not about the truth about what the world is like right now
Sure.
necessarily. And books that are about nonfiction about the truth tend to be very abstract
Mhm.
because that's kind of the only level you can discuss in a nonfiction book. So, and I also think that, like, our perceptions are part of the way we see the world, and sometimes it's important to lay out the story as we're feeling it,
Mhm.
and not. I use an example of something a little spoilerly about my next book, but did Jeffrey Epstein kill himself? I don't know. I don't know. But the fact that so many people in America believe that he didn't kill himself is
Right.
in itself important, and we need to explore that.
Hmm.
And all nonfiction about Jeffrey Epstein hits a wall of what you can and can't report. And part of the reasons for that are people like May and the other main characters of my book, who
Hmm.
are actively preventing the facts as we know them to come out
Mhm.
when we need to know them. And so I'm not claiming, by the way, I'm not saying that everybody knows this some secret, like, if you decode it, you'll know all the truth, because I make stuff up. It's a blend of fact and fiction.
Sure.
And but I do think that pulp that is loud and sleazy and crazy
Mhm.
and a little bit louder than the real world can help you see the world as it actually is, because I think
Right.
the mundane facts of existence can't capture what's happening right now, and you need to see it blown up big, and then you go, yes, that's what's happening, you know.
What a great explanation. That makes a lot of sense. Definitely with when especially in the context of this book. So can we say a little bit of hyperbole then? I hope the answer is yes, because the book is, pretty brutal, and I have a pretty pessimistic view of the world,
Hmm.
but in some ways, I guess. But can we at least say that maybe this is a little bit worse than it is in real life?
Yeah, a little bit. It's a
Okay.
little bit worse. It's a little
Okay.
bit worse, in that, a lot of the violence of the world has been altered so that there aren't so many bodies on the floor anymore. You know what
Mm.
I mean? But I honestly, if you're asking me, that's what I think is inaccurate about the book, is that but the effects of power and wealth and a system that is built, and I do mean this, it sounds cynical, but I promise you, it's 15 years of experience has taught me this is true.
Mm.
Bad behavior is not tolerated in Hollywood, it's rewarded. It's
Mm.
not merely tolerated.
Right.
And I've seen that prove out too many times to doubt it. And at the same time, if I was writing a factual book, all I would be able to do is tell you a story about, a TV writer who has seen, actors behave snottily. I've
Mm.
never been that close to, like, a scandal of the type of everybody
Sure.
knows, but I have been around very wealthy, powerful people who are miserable, and I
Mm.
have seen the systems that accrue around those people to make sure that nothing goes wrong, and I have been a part of that system.
Right.
I have stood there, like, shamefacedly with, looking at my shoes while a famous person yells at somebody who doesn't deserve it, and I didn't
Mhm.
step forward, I didn't punch the guy who deserved to be punched. And that is a lot of where writing Everybody Knows was about, me dealing with the feelings of, like, my inaction in those moments. And again, I'm not talking about covering up abuse. I'm not
Sure.
saying I I'm sitting on something felonious. I'm just saying there are moments in my life where I chose the security of my job and the fact that I was making money that I couldn't make. Yeah, I'm not qualified to do anything else. So like, but I could make a lot less money, and that's a
Yeah.
choice I could make and that I have in my life not made. And everybody knows is about me wrestling with that and trying to figure out if
Oh,
there's any moral way to do this. And I, by the way, still don't have an answer that is yes.
sure. Well,
Um,
I'm sorry.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, so I mean, I went back and just looked up the definition for noir, and it's a genre of crime film or fiction characterized by cynicism. You use the word cynical, fatalism, and moral ambiguity. The book doesn't have the answers. The book doesn't have a happy, neat ending, and I don't think it would work if it did, right?
No, I don't think so. I really don't think so. All I'll say is I had a very different ending in mind
Mm.
for Everybody Knows when I wrote it, but it was actually a much darker ending.
Oh, God.
So
Oh, God.
yeah. And I didn't earn it. And I'm very glad that I did not use my original ending. But
Maybe the reader is
I
too.
yeah, no, and that was kind of, there are people who write those kind of inky black noirs where like there is literally no hope, but my own political convictions and my own, I do have an optimism in humanity's potential, if not
Sure.
execution.
Sure.
But that I do think it's important to suggest that there at least is some value in fighting, even if you're not going to win.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, was it taxing on you mentally, emotionally to kind of live in the muck, as you wrote this book?
I mean, I sort of somebody asked me one time how much research I do, and I had to be honest and say I don't research anything I'm not interested in, and unfortunately, these are the things that I'm interested in.
Yeah.
So no, not really. I mean, I this is the stuff that interests me, and I read the LA Times and clip out stories about murders and home invasions and drug deals gone wrong and
Mhm.
police corruption and I live in this world. Again, I've been writing about crime in one way or another for about my whole life, and
Mhm.
it's an area that I find, the moral ambiguity, and it's a dramatic stage where anything can happen.
Yeah.
And where, as Cormac McCarthy said, like it's hard for him to engage with a story where life and death isn't on the line.
Mm.
I more or less walk in that same area that I want to feel, because I can go out and experience, bourgeois life anytime I want. So like reading about just like people who are like kind of comfortable, but their marriage is sad or whatever. I'm sorry that I made a noise there, but like that's just not for me. That other
Uh-huh.
people can enjoy that, and I'm not a
Sure.
cop, but like it's not for me. I like stakes, whether that's in crime fiction or horror, or science fiction, political dramas, war stories. That's where my interest lies. So I don't know. I have not. I mean, look, if I just reach over here, I've got The Powers of Horror, which is a philosophical tome. I've got a book called Snitch Jacket.
Ooh.
I've got Ed Brubaker's Criminal right here. This is all literally within me reaching distance. This book, Sick City, which is about, I
Definitely heard
think,
about
I
that.
haven't started it, but it's a book about a guy who stumbles on a Sharon Tate sex tape.
Okay.
And
Okay.
then down there, I've got an Andrew Vax novel and a history of the AK-47. Like
Dang.
this is just what I have around me because this is what I'm looking at. So like,
Whoa.
I'm in my zone. I'm doing what I'm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you read Roberto Saviano?
What he just had a book
He
that.
he did he did Gomorrah was his
Sure.
famous
Yeah, I've read
one.
Gomorrah, and I've
There's
seen the Italian movie.
yeah. There's a chapter in that book, the original book, that is so incredibly moving in so many ways. It's resonant. It's about the AK-47
Mm.
and about going to visit like the guy who basically created that and just him kind of reckoning with the absolute damage it's done, right?
Oh, that's interesting. It's a fascinating gun. A
Big
truly
stuff,
world-changing gun. So
right?
yeah.
Um, so the book gets into it starts off with May, and May has literally like I don't know if literally is the word. She's chopped off part of her name. She's from the Ozarks. She was Mandy May. And she's summoned to the hotel, the Chateau Marmont. I don't know if I'm saying it right.
Yeah, you
All
can
right.
say the T.
Okay. The
Yeah.
the famous one, right? Or the famous or the infamous one.
Yeah.
And she's there doing cleanup, like you said. What is it? keep things in, not let them out, kind of thing.
Yeah, you don't get the good news out, you keep the bad news in.
Right. And this is for Hannah Hurd, who's, I don't know, Lindsay Lohan or Amanda Bynes, unfortunately, just, recently in the news.
Yeah.
Right. And she has this line. I mean, obviously one of the themes in the book is about Hollywood and about men just being misogynistic and power dominated, and of course the word toxic. But one of her quotes, it really stood out to me, was, everybody talks about how actresses are crazy, nobody talks about how they got that way. And again, that was Hannah. And I'm just so interested in how you wrote about her, like her next arc, or her arc was like, okay, she was the tween actress star, right? Almost like a Disney Channel type thing, I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Then she went crazy, then she had the Britney Spears blow up, the Lindsay Lohan, in the tabloids. And now it's like, all right, now she's got to get clean. There's got to be a redemptive story. She does an indie,
Yes. It's
Macaulay
all very
Culkin-ish,
plotted. Yeah.
right? But that line that she said is, in some ways fairly basic, but so true about, like, what made Amanda Bynes this way? What made, and a lot of it unfortunately has to do with these men who are basically predators, right? Eric Alger, he had this series called As If, which is really a launching pad for, again, these tween stars, right? And that gets to be a big part of the book. How would you describe the PR firm Mitnick and Associates? Kind of what, besides the quote you said, what is it exactly that they do? What does May do kind of on a daily basis?
Well, yeah, the official name for firms like theirs is crisis management, and basically their job is to handle PR and news for people who are in a position to get bad press and bad news, and specifically people with money who have that happening to us. So they can be anything from, a celebrity in a scandal to a giant corporation that is fighting off a unionization effort. You can, again, Google Amazon and this kind of stuff. You will find suddenly a bad news story leaks about a person planning a strike in some warehouse, and everything is planted. And again, like, fake news is such a political term right now, and it's too bad, because we really don't deal with how much of modern news is either dictated, pitched, or shaped by some kind of news agent who is not the reporter and has a vested interest in the story. We don't talk about it. Talk about between the LAPD and the LA Sheriff's Department, there's something like 75 full-time PR people just handling the way that those two agencies are represented in the news.